Okay, I think we can get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session on context-based water stewardship. My name is Sarah Walker, and I'm the Director of Corporate Water Engagement at the World Resources Institute. So I want to start with just some initial housekeeping. Please do keep yourselves on mute while we're in this main plenary session, and please keep videos off for right now. We encourage you to change your name if needed in the participant list so we can see who you are and where you're from. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, go ahead. You can also use the chat for questions, which we'll try to answer throughout the session. We will go into breakout rooms later on, about halfway through the session, where we'll do some small group discussions. And at that point, you're welcome to turn your video on if you'd like to. And you may need to have Zoom downloaded to join those sessions. So for our session today, WRI is convening this session along with Procter & Gamble, International Paper, and Camira. We'll hear from Shannon Quinn, who is Procter & Gamble's Global Water Stewardship Leader, Matt Inbush, a Senior Manager for Sustainable Operations at International Paper, Mats Berg, Director of Business Development, and Scott Calderon in Corporate Accounts from Camira. And we're going to follow the life cycle of a roll of paper towel from the forest to the front door. And each of these speakers will share their experiences implementing water stewardship strategies for their respective sections of the value chain. And we'll hear how they're trying to collaborate together around some common priority areas. So first, I'd like to start with a very brief overview of what the corporate water stewardship journey looks like for many companies and how this discussion kind of fits into that. So the first step, starting on the left, is typically to assess water risks to a company's direct operations to ensure that they have an adequate supply of clean water to meet their needs. But increasingly, companies are realizing that water risks originate not just from their own impacts and dependencies related to operations, but they can also be a function of the catchment context, and they may surface anywhere along the value chain. So the second stage shown here is incorporating that catchment context into risk assessments and decision-making. And companies in this stage are often looking upstream and downstream in their value chains to really get the full picture of their water risks and shared water challenges in the catchments, not only where they operate, but also from which they source or provide goods and services. So with a good grasp on the context, then strategies can then be implemented, which focus efforts on the right places and the right issues to contribute toward meeting desired conditions in high priority catchments across the whole value chain. So for example, some companies are developing strategies around contextual water targets. WRI, along with some partners, including Pacific Institute and CEO Water Mandate, CDP, the Nature Conservancy, and WWF, recently released guidance on setting contextual water targets across an enterprise. And this follows guidance from 2019 on setting contextual water targets at a site level. And also the Science Based Target Network is developing a methodology for how companies can set science-based targets for water, which follows a similar approach in terms of accounting for impacts and dependencies and the state of nature in catchments throughout a company's value chain. So these kinds of guidance documents are really facilitating the advancement of many companies through their water stewardship journeys and ultimately into this final engagement stage. So engagement is particularly important for implementation efforts upstream and downstream, where companies don't have direct control and likely don't have as strong of a grasp on the local context as they might in their home landscape. So companies can benefit from pursuing collective action opportunities to engage stakeholders to help address shared water challenges. But some businesses, as we'll hear today, are getting stuck on this implementation stage due to the challenges of collective action. Priorities may not align among various actors in a value chain or in a basin. Some actors may use more or less water than others. It's time intensive and it's really difficult to understand the whole picture and all the actors involved. So this is really the crux of the issue that we'll focus on for today's session. P&G, International Paper, and Chimera are currently facing this next stage in their journeys, and they're going to discuss their respective impacts and dependencies on water across the life cycle of this roll of paper towel. It's a product that each of these companies plays a role in producing and selling, and we'll hear how these companies can be more effective at mitigating their risks and addressing shared water challenges through a joined up approach. So we'll hear what's been working well and what's been challenging. And after we've heard from each company, we'll split into breakout groups to further discuss the challenges of collective action. So please be thinking about what obstacles you may be facing in your own company or in the work that you're doing with the private sector, and what pathways there may be for overcoming them. So at this point, I will turn it over to Shannon Quinn, who will illustrate the life cycle of a Bounty paper towel roll and P&G's role.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. So the Bounty paper towel is really what initially brought our three companies together. And it brought us together to explore specifically how water is being used from the forest, where its primary ingredient is grown and harvested, to the front door of the consumers of the product. For those who don't know, Bounty is a paper towel brand sold in North America, and it's part of the P&G family of brands. It's primarily used to clean up wet messes, and unlike many other P&G products, it is not associated with water in the in-use phase or in the downstream area of the value chain. The overwhelming majority of the water use occurs further upstream during manufacturing and raw material production. So we started to look upstream from the home for ways we could reduce impact and also collaborate on the topic of water. The Bounty product starts its life in a responsibly managed forest, and one of its primary ingredients is wood fiber, which then heads to the pulp mills from the forest, where companies like International Paper process the material. International Paper works with companies like Chimera to ensure that they're processing the materials both efficiently and for the right intended use, before sending them along to the customers like P&G. So once P&G receives the pulp, it's used to make the final product within our facilities, which consumers all over North America can then purchase and bring home to clean up really tough messes. When we started looking across this value chain, we came first to P&G's manufacturing plants, where water is used to produce the final product before it's shipped to retail stores for purchase by consumers. To reduce our impact, we started by focusing on decreasing water use during production. We have 6 facilities across the United States that are producing Bounty, and all of these sites are working to reduce water use by at least 35% per unit of production. But we have particular focus on 2 of these 6 facilities that are located in areas of high water stress. Both of these sites have gone through the first 2 steps of the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard to create water stewardship action plans. And our Oxnard facility, which is in Southern California, has exceeded their water savings targets over the past few years. The brand and the company is also working outside of the 4 walls of the facility within some of these basins, which we call our priority basins. And this is where P&G is taking action to protect water for people and for nature. Bounty's invested in planting thousands of trees in the Sacramento River Basin, one of the company's 18 priority basins. The project has helped the company explore the close relationship between healthy forests and watersheds by working to account for water benefits realized through the restoration of forests. This is one of the topics that we've discussed with our supplier, International Paper, and trying to find ways that we can collaborate outside of the 4 walls of our facilities. So I'll pass it along to Matt now, who can tell us a little bit about their place in Bounty's value chain.
Great, thanks, Shannon. So for those who might not know International Paper, we are one of the world's leading producers of renewable fiber-based packaging, pulp and paper. And what we effectively do is we transform renewable resources, specifically responsibly grown and harvested wood fiber, as well as recovered fiber, into products that people depend on every day. And so today we're talking about the pulp that goes into those Bounty paper towels that Shannon just talked us through. And at IP, we're working to advance water stewardship in the places where we live and work, with the long-term objective of improving the shared water resources for all users in those areas. And we're really specifically focused on our operations. For those who know the pulp and paper industry, it's a large water user. We're not a large water consumer. We return over 90% of what we use in the pulp making process back to the environment after a rigorous treatment process. But nevertheless, we use a lot of water. We have a large water impact on the wastewater effluent side, and we work really hard to maintain high quality water, both coming into our mills and returning to the environment. And we're heavily regulated in that space as well. So we have a lot of focus on our internal operations around pulp making, but we're also thinking very, very strategically about our value chains. And today's a great example of value chain collaboration and dialogue. We have a really deep engagement with our wood fiber supply chain. And even though we don't manage or own the forest land that we source from, we're very deeply engaged there to make sure the right practices are happening at the forest level to maintain healthy and abundant forests for the long term, which, as everyone here probably knows, and Shannon just highlighted, also has really important co-benefits for water supply and water quality for everyone in the watershed. So water stewardship fits into what we call our Vision 2030, which is our commitment to building a better future for people, the planet, and our company over the next 10 years. And we have 4 broad goal areas, as you can see here. And today we'll really focus on the sustainable operations piece, which is where water stewardship is located. And so along with an ambitious decarbonization plan that's aligned with the best available climate science, our water stewardship strategy is the second piece of the sustainable operations. And here we're focused on reducing our operational water use by 25%, and also implementing what we're calling context-based water management plans. And so these are it's kind of a 2-piece target, but these 2 targets are very much interconnected in the sense that we believe local inputs and local context should drive the actions on the ground at each of these facilities and within those watersheds. And so, for example, the water use reduction for each facility will depend largely on the water supply and demand ratio and other drivers within that local basin. And within the company, we talk a lot about how our entire business model really depends on the sustainability of forests. And more in recent years, as we've developed this strategy, we've added water to that phrase because we recognize, again, not just how important water is for our own operations and the products that we pass on to our customers, but we also recognize the increasing urgency around water issues, both in the U.S., where we operate most of our facilities, and globally. And so the kind of guiding question that we've been using for the last couple of years is, what would it look like to approach water more like we do forests? And we've been committed to and leading on responsible forestry for over 100 years. Kind of what can we learn from that process to apply to our water related efforts? And what that's led us to is an approach that we believe is holistic, it's proactive, and it's strategic. And strategic because there are a few kind of key drivers behind the work that we're doing on water stewardship. One is really business continuity and operations, and so we rely on water to make our products. We can't make them without it, and so we need to be gathering all the best data, using the best tools and analysis, forming the right partnerships to not just ensure quality water supply today for our facilities and our communities, but also 5, 10, 20 and beyond years from now into the future. The second driver behind this has to do with stakeholders. And so this conversation today is a good example of value chain partners and stakeholders. And so we think about customer demand, our shareholders, the communities where we operate, our own employees, and among other external drivers that are pushing us to go bigger and faster on water stewardship, again, because of the increasing urgency of this issue. And then finally, as an internal driver that sort of wraps around it, we think about this concept of stewardship. And at IP, we think about it as working to leave everything in better shape for future generations. And so it's hard to think of a topic that is more sort of universal and critical than water for human existence and for us to thrive as a planet and a community. So we have sort of this combination of internal and external drivers that are pushing us on water stewardship, and we can go into more detail on some of that as we get into the session today. But for now, I'll pass it over to Camira to talk about their approach.
All right, thank you, Matt. So hello, everybody. I'm Matt Sberg from Camira, and I'm going to be talking about a little bit what we do here in this value chain. So for you that don't know us, we're a global chemicals company. We've been 100 years in business. And for us, pulp and paper is really at the heart of what we do. 60% of our business is from pulp and paper. And we work with water-intensive industries. So pulp and paper, as Matt was saying, also very water-intensive. And we work to help then to reduce and reduce water in the pulp and paper industry. So what our portfolio of products is everything from the pulp mill, then all the way to the paper mill and to the converting and end use of efficiency. So we have products for incoming water, for circulating water, and for outgoing water. So water treatment really is the heart also in the pulp and paper for us. Okay, so if you look at our three strategic sustainability priorities, water is at the heart of that as well, and enhancing the access to clean and safe water is what we do, and we see chemistry really as the enabler for that. So what our goal is then to design products and services that especially work very well in low water usages. So chemistries that have the robustness to work in closed water circuits is the key to our operations. And if you look at our targets, then also for like Matt was saying, also that for carbon carbon neutrality by 2045, also reduction in carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. So we also have targets for bio-based products. So we're more and more focused on bio-based chemistries. And also for water, really for us, the water footprint as such is quite low. So we actually work more with the handprint of the water in our customer processes. So if you think about the footprint of Camira, so really 90% of the water that we use is for cooling water. So there is no treatment for that. And then if you look about the industries that we serve, there the water usage is very, very high. So what we work with is really ways to find how we can then make the efficiency better for reducing water, and then also for enabling then processes for that. Okay, Scott, I turn over to you here.
Okay, so let's see, get my video going. As Mats was saying, our greatest impact is our water handprint. That's where we really focus in the value chain, because recycling water does have associated savings, but there are significant costs too. Those costs come in the form of reduced operating efficiencies and quality for the pulp and paper manufacturers. Recycled water can greatly reduce the efficiency of chemical additives used to make pulp, or in this case, paper towels. Because of this, we manufacture chemicals specifically designed to work in these more demanding environments with highly recycled water. Our technology isn't just chemical, but it also involves the physical application of chemistry. Typical chemical injection on a paper machine may require 150 gallons a minute of fresh water. That's 77 million gallons a year, or about 300 cubic meters per year. The good news, this amount of fresh water can be completely eliminated with recycled water by using specially designed injection nozzles. And I'll turn it over to Matt, I believe.
I'll take it. Take it, Matt. Just wanted to spend some time. You've seen individually now each of our companies a little bit about, not only our place in the value chain of this Bounty paper towel, but also what we're doing to address those impact areas individually. But what we wanted to do, each of our companies have been really working to move up this water stewardship maturity curve, and we were interested in engaging with value chains, or with others in our value chain. And so we each started individually looking to identify up and downstream where water was being impacted the most. And in the case of Bounty, we saw quickly that water was being used upstream from our operations to process pulp, used to make the product, both in our own manufacturing, but also further upstream in raw materials processing. And in the case of Chimera, you saw that they found their primary impacts are in the downstream at the locations of facilities where their products are being used and where they can help to make the processes more efficient for their customers. And then we each identified one another, our three companies along that value chain, as potential partners. And we started to share the good practices that we've been using individually, and also worked to explore any mutual goals or overlapping priority areas that we could work together to address. And after that, we arrived at really starting to talk about, are there potential collaborative action, or are there other ways that we can work together to advance sustainable water management and improve the performance along the value chain? But as we've progressed along this conversation, along trying to look for more ways to collaborate and then move towards action, we've encountered some significant challenges. And that's what we really want to discuss next, and what we want to tease apart and get some feedback on, and get some advice on and experience on during our breakout sessions.
Okay, so one of the principal challenges is data collection and sharing, and to move beyond just simple discussion and actually enact some kind of meaningful action. Data collection is an essential first step in any endeavor that requires money to be spent. There needs to be some kind of measurements for gauging the challenge and the effectiveness of the investment. With respect to data sharing, that has its own unique set of challenges, which are multifaceted. Meaningful sharing between organizations, particularly commercial ones, in many cases requires legal protections in the form of non-disclosure agreements, for an example. And this particular step is real work, and it also has an associated cost.
Yeah, and another set of challenges that we've experienced and we're seeing is around sort of the rules of the road on water stewardship. And what we mean by that is that water is such a hyper local issue, and it's so multifaceted, from water supply and demand to water quality and stakeholder engagement and many other facets. There's no kind of one way to do this. And if you're familiar with the sort of decarbonization movement and science-based targets, there's no 1.5 degree or 2 degree scenario for water that the world has sort of agreed on. There's no GHG protocol. There's no scope 3 for water to engage with your value chain in a sort of prescriptive way. And so there's a lot of great guidance out there, and WRI has been doing some leading work there and mentioned that at the top. But there's no one way to do it, and I think that presents some challenges for collaboration within the value chain. And similarly, companies can be sort of in different places on their water stewardship journey and have different levels of strategic attention and resources committed to this work. We've heard today about sort of operational efficiency focus versus focusing on products and value chain impacts, and then also the landscape level collaboration. Also factors like how heavily regulated are you, how hard are your stakeholders pushing you on this issue versus other issues like decarbonization and pollution and so on. And so there's a bit of a challenge there too, where not everyone's at the same place on that journey.
Yeah, and so, with respect to the different drivers and incentives, any kind of desired change is associated with, either an incentive or a cost. The incentives for commercial enterprises investment can be internal or external. Internally, these motivations are value creation or cost avoidance. When change is desired, absent of the typical internal incentives, government regulation commonly becomes the tool to create change where cost influences future behaviors.
Yeah, and finally, even if a lot of the dots kind of do connect, there might just be strategic barriers ultimately to forming a partnership or to collaborating. As an example, Camira talked about some of the processes and products that they provide to our industry. But our company has to weigh those investments among lots of other investments, and so the investment sort of picture might not be right to take advantage of some of these great services at a local facility within that context and that moment when we might like to. And similarly, Shannon and I have actually talked a lot about this over the years of we're highly aligned on our water stewardship context-based approach, but our companies don't actually share priority basins that we're focused on. And so even though we'd like to collaborate at more of a landscape level, there simply aren't those opportunities that are really available to us on the ground today.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So we're doing great on time, which is wonderful. So right now we're going to assign all of you to a few different virtual breakout rooms where we can further discuss some of these challenges that have been raised around engaging in collective action and hopefully identify some potential solutions. So these are the 4 discussion questions that we'll be working through in our respective breakout groups. And each of the conveners, the hosts of this session, will serve as the facilitators and note takers. We're going to keep all the comments anonymous to really encourage free-flowing discussion. And then we will try to do a synthesis after the session in an anonymized format. So you'll get an invitation to join a breakout group. Some of you may actually be staying in the main room for your breakout. Feel free to now turn your videos on for this breakout discussion. And then we will spend about 25 minutes in the breakout groups and then come back for the last 5 minutes into plenary to summarize the group's discussion. So
Okay, I think we made it into our breakout group.
Great. This is team unassigned.
Yep.
Let's give folks maybe just another sec to make sure we're all here.
Okay.
We got swept up and put back in the main room.
Yeah, I think I was just in the middle of a sentence.
Mid-sentence, that's right.
But no, that was good discussion.
Yeah, it was.
Well, maybe do you from that breakout, do you guys want to share a couple quick takeaways? I think we have enough time to do maybe just 30 seconds from each group, and then wrap it up.
Well, one real quick one, they said that we need a common language in terms of gathering data and information. They thought that would be particularly helpful.
And also being pragmatic in the data, like you were saying that there will not always be 100% data available, but really to take that step of working with that data, and the sharing data is one of the key elements.
Right. And when you say common language, do you mean, Scott, around sort of metrics and ways of measuring water impacts, things like that?
Yeah, they didn't really define it, but I do think that's exactly what was meant by that.
One other comment I'd like to make from our team too, if I could, is I think it was brought up, it was a good point about this cross-benefit analysis. When we look at gathering data around water stewardship, there's companies out there and people looking at this around different options, like just business as usual versus deploying capital towards something, and looking at indirect costs and benefits, intangible versus intangible benefits, and trying to really put value to those types of things, to give some context to the incentives and incentivizing change and things like that. I thought that was a good comment. That's
Great.
it for us.
Sarah, what about from your room?
Yeah, I can do hopefully 30-second overview. So we definitely had a lot of challenges resonate with our participants that were discussed, particularly the lack of overlapping priority regions in some cases. Financing in particular can be very challenging. Operational budgets are very different from like watershed collaboration project budgets. In terms of incentivizing collective action, we have seen some success from ag suppliers getting pressure from their buyers, in particular European retailers, who really want to see better data and more work around water use. So that external pressure was mentioned. As far as the third question, the balance of operational versus watershed collaboration, we kind of just discussed how this is so context specific, company specific, but one good example of a way to kind of sort through all of that is AWS and more need for those sorts of standardized frameworks. And then finally, for the last question, we kind of talked about just recognizing that water is a key resource, and businesses can really only succeed if they're aware of other actors in the value chain in the watershed and can get to that kind of shared understanding of the challenges that they all face in order to work together towards a common goal. And again, how kind of having standardized guidelines for how to do that sort of thing would go a long way.
Great. I think we're running out of time. Shannon, a couple words from ours.
Yeah, a lot of things similar to Sarah, recognition that a lot of companies are starting to move up the maturity curve in this way and identifying up and downstream impact areas and trying to have these types of partnerships, and that they're facing similar types of challenges. One good potential solution that we've seen is examples like in California, where we have the California Water Action Collaborative that has companies, NGOs, and foundations as part of it to find a mutual action areas. And then we talked about how even though it's becoming more common and more of an expectation to start working collaboratively outside of your four walls, that we have to make sure that our own house is in order and your operations are operating as efficiently and effectively as possible before you start to move out, or at least do it in parallel.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. I think we're just about out of time, but really appreciate everyone's participation today. I think from all the panelists here, we really believe that this kind of dialogue is really important because this stuff is tricky. And so I think that would be our just takeaway message here is let's keep the dialogue going and and try to be as open and honest about these challenges as we can, and work together, because we're all, we all need to be part of the solution. So with that, we'll let you go. Thanks again for being here today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
all.
Thanks, guys.